Someone died today. Not in a hospital. Not surrounded by machines and monitors and the quiet hum of life support. Out here. In the open. On the rocky ground where they had lived and hunted and slept and laughed. And now they were gone. And the group stood around them. And nobody knew what to do. Because nothing in nature prepares you for this moment. No animal has a protocol for it. No instinct fires with a clear instruction. You just stand there. With the person who was here yesterday and is not here today. And you feel something that has no name yet. Grief. One of the oldest, most devastating, and most uniquely human experiences that exists. And what your ancestors did with it tells us something profound about what it means to be human. Let us start with what the evidence actually shows. The oldest confirmed intentional burial ever found dates back approximately 300,000 years. In a cave system in South Africa called Rising Star, anthropologists discovered the remains of a small-brained ancient human called Homo naledi. The bodies were placed deep inside a cave system that required navigating narrow passages in complete darkness to reach. They were not dragged there by predators. They were carried there. Deliberately. By others of their kind. 300,000 years ago. A creature we used to think was too primitive to have complex thoughts or feelings. Carrying its dead deep into the darkness of a cave to place them somewhere specific. That is not instinct. That is something else entirely. Moving forward in time, the evidence becomes richer and more specific. Around 100,000 years ago in a cave in Israel called Kafsa, archaeologists found the buried remains of a child. Beside the child, placed with care, was the antler of a red deer. Not a tool. Not food. A gift. Something placed in the grave because it meant something to the people who placed it there. Something they wanted the child to have. A child buried with a gift 100,000 years ago. Think about what that means. That is not just burying a body. That is believing that the body is going somewhere. That the child might need something on the journey. That the relationship between the living and the dead does not simply end at the moment of death. That is the beginning of something that every human civilization in history has had. A belief in what comes after. And as we move closer to the present, the burials become even more elaborate. Around 34,000 years ago at a site called Sunghir in Russia, archaeologists found the graves of an older man and two children buried together. Their bodies were covered in thousands of mammoth ivory beads that had been sewn onto their clothing. The beads alone would have taken an estimated 10,000 hours of labor to produce. Someone spent 10,000 hours making something beautiful to bury with the dead. They also found weapons, tools, animal remains. Everything the dead might need. These were not quick burials out of necessity. These were ceremonies. Rituals. Events that took time and effort and involved the whole community. Events that said, we see you. We knew you. You mattered. And you are going somewhere and we want you to be ready. But here is what moves me most about all of this. It is not the elaborate burials. It is the simplest ones. At a site called Shanidar Cave in Iraq, dating back around 60,000 years, archaeologists found the remains of a Neanderthal buried with what appeared to be flowers. Pollen was found clustered around the body in patterns that suggested deliberate placement. Now researchers debate whether the flowers were placed intentionally or carried by burrowing animals. But what is not debated is what else was found. The skeleton of an older Neanderthal male who had suffered severe injuries throughout his life. One arm had been amputated or had withered away. He had serious damage to his eye socket, suggesting he may have been partially blind. His legs showed injury. And yet, the bone growth patterns showed that he had lived for years after these injuries occurred. He could not have survived alone. Someone fed him. Someone protected him. Someone carried him when he could not walk. For years. Not because it was efficient. Not because he contributed meaningfully to the hunt. Because he was one of them. Because they could not leave him. That is not survival behavior. That is love. And when he finally died, they buried him. That is what ancient humans did when someone died. They grieved. They gathered. They placed the body somewhere specific. They gave gifts. They performed rituals that no other animal on earth performs. And sometimes they cared for the dying for years before the death came. Not because it made strategic sense. Because something in them could not do otherwise. The capacity for grief is the shadow side of the capacity for love. You cannot have one without the other. And the evidence tells us that both are at least 300,000 years old. Possibly older. Your grief is not modern. Your love is not modern. They are as old as the species. And somewhere out there, 300,000 years ago, someone carried someone they loved deep into a cave in the dark. And laid them down gently. And said goodbye.